Hello, friends. Welcome in or welcome back. I'm Hannah of Sincerely Hannah B. And in today's video, we're going to talk about everything that I read in June. As I'm filming this, it is a sweltering hot morning in Chicago on July 1st. We've been in the middle of a heat wave for this is day 2 of it, and it is not letting up. I had to check and make sure that the air conditioning wasn't going to pick up on my mic as I filmed this because I can't bother to turn it off. I really don't want to turn it off. It is getting really hot in here without it. So without any further ado, let's get into the books. First thing that I read in June was a book I picked up from one of the book clubs that I'm a part of. This is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. This is a sci-fi novel, a really short one, but it packs such a huge punch. This is following two people who are on opposite sides of a war spanning all of time and space. On one side, you have Red. She is working for the agency. This is like kind of more of your technology-focused side of the war. And then you also have Blue, who is working for the Garden, and they are much more focused on like nature and kind of natural world. And these two forces have been fighting for a very long time. They don't even really know what they're fighting for. Certainly Red and Blue aren't totally sure anymore, but they are extremely loyal to their causes until they meet each other. And once they meet each other on the battlefield, they start leaving letters for each other, and it opens up this correspondence between these two people. And it is just such an incredible read once you get into that. The way that this book kind of flows, the way that it is also written by two authors. Each of these authors took one of the characters and they were writing back and forth to each other. And it's my understanding that the authors didn't necessarily know what was coming in the letters that one was writing to the other, which I think is really fascinating and adds another level of interest to this book. The thing I will say about this is the war itself really is only a vehicle to tell the story of this connection between these two people. The story at its core is about connection. It is this connection that these two people make with one another. Blue and Red both have they're very loyal to their sides, like I said, but the deeper they get into this war, the more they both start to question why they're in it and what's the point, and they kind of start wondering if their loyalties really are more to each other than to the sides they're fighting for. But the thing that I love most about this is just their like literary references and the pop culture references that kind of are dotted throughout this. As they talk about books that the other one should read, and because they are traveling through time and space, they all end up in these different locations. Atlantis is like a very kind of, I don't want to say meta. Atlantis has a very large joke in this, which I found to be really funny. They're both kind of their viewpoints on Atlantis. And yeah, there's just so much that I liked about this. I felt really satisfied by the ending. I did walk away from it being like, I really want like a second book, but I want it to be totally different from this because I want to see them ending this war entirely. But that is not what this book is trying to do. I think this is so beautifully written. If you haven't picked it up yet, I know a lot of people have raved about this. I'm like very late to the party in reading it, but I really had a great time with this. And if you are wanting to try sci-fi, I think this is a great place to start because it is not super heavy sci-fi. It's very much something that you can kind of dip your toes into and you don't have to have like some deeper understanding of like sci-fi tropes. So yeah, really enjoyed my time with this. I believe both authors have other books out and I would like to give both of them a try at some point in the future because the writing in this is just absolutely stunning. The next thing that I picked up was a book that has been sitting on my shelf for quite a while, but I saw that this author has a new novella coming out for the sequel series to this series, and I'm really intrigued by reading it / getting the new editions, but I told myself I can't pre-order those editions until I've actually read the prequel series. And I'm talking about Stephanie Garber, so the book that I picked up was Caraval. This is a YA fantasy series, and I think the first book came out maybe in like 2016, 2017. This has been sitting on my shelf for quite a long time. In this book, you are following a pair of sisters, Scarlett and Donatella. They both are the daughters of a governor of an island. He is not particularly kind to them. He is very demanding. He doesn't necessarily give them the autonomy or the freedoms that, I think they're both striving for, being kind of young adults. And Scarlett is our older sister, and she's the one we are predominantly following. She has always wanted to go to Caraval, which is this like magical, spectacular show that used to be a traveling show and one could never go to the same location twice, but now has kind of settled in this one place. And Scarlett has been desperate to go for years, and she's even been writing letters to Legend, the leader of Caraval, in order to try to find her way to get them to come to the island or for her to be able to go to Caraval. And finally, she is betrothed and she writes one last letter to Legend saying she just can't she's giving up on this dream, and she hopes that one day she will be able to see Caraval, maybe once she's married. And she gets a letter back from Legend with tickets inviting her and her fiance to Caraval. And Scarlet is hesitant, but the sisters end up there. And of course, as soon as they get there, Donatella goes missing. And then Scarlet only has a few days to find her before they both need to return home before their father finds them missing. It is a very interesting world that this is set in. I really enjoyed the world, but I almost feel like I needed more world building from this. The writing is fine, but the author definitely relies on a lot of like metaphors and purpley metaphors, I would say, to like set the vibes and the aesthetic versus actually giving real descriptions of things. We spent a lot of time talking about clothes, which I appreciate. I always love a good dress description, but I feel like the world itself just needed a little more fleshing out. I didn't mind the characters. Scarlet is an interesting main character, but I was actually more intrigued by Donatella, who we don't get to see a lot of on the page. I did like the story and the plot. I'm very curious to see where this is going to go, so I do think I will be continuing the series, but I still don't know if I liked it enough to put down the money to pre-order the sequel series, which is Once Upon a Broken Heart. I know I have to finish this whole thing before I can read that series, and while the world is really interesting, and maybe that's enough, I just don't know if I'm loving the writing enough to want to actually buy the books. So I'm going to just continue by getting these from the library. I know a lot of people say that the Caraval series isn't quite as good as Once Upon a Broken Heart. So that's the other thing I'm kind of thinking about as I go through this. I love the world and I want to see where the story goes. I'm very curious to see where book 2 goes with the way book 1 ended, but we'll see how things go. The next thing I finished in June was a cozy fantasy that, again, I picked up for a book club. This was one I was really intrigued by, even though I'm very hit or miss with cozy fantasy. I feel like I either really enjoy it or it's too cozy. It's a very fine line I have to walk with this subgenre. This one, I read another series by the author. I read the first book in her first series, which she is now releasing more books for, but I'm talking about Heather Fawcett, and this is Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter. This is a standalone fantasy, I believe. I don't believe we're going to have anything else in it. And this is the Owl Crate edition, which is just stunning. This is set in a magical Montreal where magicians are a thing in this world and they're kind of feared. They don't always do what's best for society and all that. There's a lot of mixed feelings on them. And Agnes is one who suffers from a pair of magicians dueling. She has this cat shelter. It is damaged in this duel, and so she has to find a new place for all of her cats. And the building that she ends up finding is actually owned by one of the darkest magicians of all that a lot of people fear, Havelock. Without knowing that he is the landlord of this building, she accepts the rental offer and sets up the shelter, and then she finds out what she's dealing with, and she has to kind of deal with the fallout of that decision. This is a book where if you don't like cats, you are not going to like this book, because the cats are very much key players in this story. They have their own personalities. They very much contribute to the plot. They're very cute, and I do like how they came on the page. I don't think they were like overwhelming or anything, and they don't talk. It's not like that type of thing, but they just very much, their personalities come through on these pages. I wish, however, Havelock's personality came through a little more. He is our male main character in this. And I know this book, I think, has a lot of inspiration drawn from Howl's Moving Castle, which I have never seen or read. It's on my list. I can't speak to that, but what I can speak to is the fact that I feel like Havelock, despite being one of the main characters, just doesn't spend enough time on the page in this for me to feel like really excited. Like, I don't really care when he's there. And I think that's a detriment, because when you do have time with him, there is like sparks of interest. And I think his dynamic with Agnes is very like fun and interesting, but there just wasn't enough of it. We spend a lot of time with Agnes and with the cats and, you know, talking to all these people who are adopting the cats. And that's fine and good, because that's, you know, that's part of the title, but it just felt like I wanted more out of it. And the coziness didn't actually bother me in this one. It felt like the right amount of cozy. Like, there were still stakes. I still felt like, oh, what's going to happen? Like, how are we going to get this happy ending? It was merely just that I wanted more from the book. Like, I wanted more from Agnes. I wanted more from Havelock. I wanted more from the relationships between these people. I felt like we just kind of spent a lot of time glossing over things. I really wanted, there is kind of our villain. I wanted her to have more of like a, not necessarily a relationship, but a discussion with Agnes, because I think there was a lot of interesting things there that were left unsaid. Yeah, I enjoyed this. I enjoyed it enough that I'm going to keep it. I think it's like the kind of book that I would love to revisit on like a cozy night this fall when I just want something to pick up and read. But I do feel like I've read better cozy fantasy before. I just feel like this fell a little bit flat. I enjoyed my time with this, but I really don't feel like I have much to say about it because again, it was just lacking in the end, I feel. The next book that I finished was a nonfiction, a memoir, and I read this on ebook from the library. This is My Life in France by Julia Child and Alex Prodhomme. This is Julia Child's book talking about how she got started in cooking and fell in love with cooking in France and the years that she spent living in the country before she moved back to the States. I really enjoyed reading this. I was reading this as part of my personal curriculum for this summer. I'm kind of studying like food and how food and socialization are tied together, the importance of food and culture and that. And this felt like a really interesting place to start because so much of Julia Child's food is about, serving others, serving parties, the love of cooking. There's, she was very big into French cooking, which can be very much a labor of love. So I thought this would be a really interesting place to start. And it very much was. Julia Child is so funny. She has this she has this witticism to her that I think comes through really nicely on the page. She's very silly. She has her quirks. She has her insecurities. And I just found her to be a very authentic woman to read about. And I actually knew a lot of when she started talking about her show and starting that on PBS and stuff, I'm very familiar with a lot of the people that were involved with that. So that was very cool to read about, having kind of that sense of place. It was just really enjoyable. It was a really nice way to spend, and I think it's a perfect summer read. A lot of the books, it's following her over the course of a few years. So you have winter in there and she's talking about snow, but for some reason it felt like a very good summer memoir because a lot of the book is also them living in the countryside in this country house and all of that. So really enjoyed this. If you like cooking, if you like food, if you like memoirs, I think this is a really great one to pick up. It's a very easy read. You'll fly right through it. And Julia Child is just such a fascinating woman to read about because also, if you aren't aware, Julia Child didn't get into cooking and food until she was in her mid-30s. She was 36 when she moved to France, and that was when she learned to cook. Up until that point, she did not know how to cook. She went to cooking school and learned from there and fell in love with the craft. So if you are somebody like me who's still trying to figure out what they want to do, know that there are people out there who it wasn't until later in life that they found their success. So another reason why I just love this book. I think Julia Child is such a fascinating personality, and I can't wait to read more of her stuff and use her cookbooks. I have her French cooking, the art of French cooking or whatever. I have that on my shelf, and I've never actually made anything from it because it's very thick and there's no photos and stuff, so it's a little daunting, but I do want to give it a try now that I've read it because her talking about how she wrote that cookbook and the way that she wanted to approach it, the way that she wanted to be very thorough, I feel like a little more confident in being able to go in and tackle the recipes in it. So that'll probably be something I do later this summer. Okay, it's time to talk about the book that stressed me out this month and the book that is still making me nauseous. Even after finishing it 2 weeks ago, I still cannot think about this book without being nauseous. I don't even know how to talk about it. I don't know what to say about it. I don't even know how I want to address it in this video. I've been thinking about it. I don't know. But I'm talking about Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. Now, I, along with so many other people, read Convenience Store Woman a year or two back and absolutely loved it. It is a novella following a woman living in Japan who works at a convenience store and is very happy in her life. She's single, she lives alone, she has this job she loves, but she is feeling the societal pressures from her family and the world around her to settle down, get married, get a real job, and all those things. And it's kind of an examination of her dealing with those expectations and still trying to find her own happiness. And I just really loved how all of that came together. And I think Earthlings tackles a lot of those same themes. What happens when you feel othered, when you feel alienated from society, when you don't want to follow that traditional path that people want. And I can appreciate what this book was saying, and I just really hate how they delivered it. This is a book that you do not want to go into unless you have read the content warnings. There is child abuse, sexual abuse, incest, cannibalism. There is a lot packed into this very tiny book. So just be aware before you dive into this that there are a lot of things in here that could be potentially triggering or uncomfortable. It's not that I think that they aren't well done in the novel, which is a weird thing to say. The author executed all of this well. It is just very hard to read. I was nauseous by the time I finished this book. In this, you are following Natsuki. She is our main character. We meet her as a child, and she has this hedgehog toy that has supposedly come from space that she found, and it talks to her, and it has claimed, very much like Sailor Moon, she's from another planet, and she's a magical girl that needs to defeat the evil from this world so that she can return home. It's a very cute premise, and then you realize that this is probably a young girl trying to cope with awful things that are happening to her as a child. Her parents aren't like super loving. They definitely favor her sister. She experiences a lot of like trauma, and it's kind of dismissed as, well, you know, you're lying and this type of thing. And then you jump forward in time to her being an adult. She's in a marriage with a man, and they have this very mutual agreement that they don't want sex. They don't want a traditional marriage. It's just two people basically trying to pretend that they are following societal expectations, even though neither of them want it. There's a lot more to it than that, but I really don't want to even get too deep into it because it feels like a lot of spoilers. But I just felt like, even though this book had a lot of interesting things to say, I never want to touch it again because it is so uncomfortable. The first half of the book is uncomfortable for one reason, because you just feel disgusting reading it, and you just feel like sad for this child and the things she's suffering, and frustrated and angry at the people around her who are failing her. And then the last two chapters are uncomfortable because it's just disgusting. Like, it's just gross what is happening. So I don't even know what else to say about it. I respect the writing, and I think the writing was well done in this, but this book is just so disturbing to me that I don't ever want to engage with it again. I still haven't decided if I want to read more by Sayaka Murata. She has another book out, and I can't remember the title. I know it's a blue cover. I'll try to pop in a photo of it, but I just don't know if I want to engage with her work if that is what, like, this is more of the standard versus convenience store women. I just think that she might not be the author for me, unfortunately. But yeah, it's intriguing. It's such an interesting book, but it is a very heavy book. It is a very hard book to read. So a lot of warnings going into this one. Because Earthlings is so traumatizing, and I would use the word traumatizing, I wanted to pick up something that was a little bit lighter, a little bit more adventurous, easier read. So I decided to grab the Stardust Grail by Yume Kitasei. And this I got from Aardvark some years ago. I'm trying to work through all of my book box picks that I have from years past, and this was one of them. This is one of the oldest ones on my shelf. This is a science fiction adventure story, kind of in the vein of like an Indiana Jones type tale. You are following Maya. She is a woman who is doing graduate studies at Princeton in anthropology, but she, prior to that, was basically a thief in space. She had been looking for this artifact that would save this alien race that is dying out, going extinct. And she never found it. She just decided that she was going to go Earthside for a while and try to go back into school and settle down. And then a donation is made to the Princeton archives, and she discovers a book that gives her clues to where this treasure she had been looking for might actually be. And it sends her back into space with this like group of kind of ragtag followers in order to find this. But she is not the only one looking for it. You have government organizations that are really wanting to get their hands on it, because it turns out that this Grail, the Stardust Grail that she calls it, might be the key to saving multiple species or multiple planets. And she has to kind of decide who, does she save this alien race that's dying out? Does she save humanity? Is there a way to save both? Does she need to sacrifice for everyone? There's a lot of different layers and levels to it that I think make this book interesting. But at its core, it is an adventure story. I think Maya's a really interesting character, and her main kind of friend is A-Uncle. I pronounced it A-Uncle. It's like A-U-N-C-L-E. And they are this alien life form that they use Zir pronouns, like X-I-R, which I thought was really interesting. There's a lot of really interesting diversity and stuff to this book that I really appreciated. But I really wished Maya had more interactions with people outside of A-Uncle. Part of it is because she doesn't necessarily trust anybody else, but there were so many interesting things being set up that I feel like we didn't really get to dive as deep into as I wanted to, because we were just really focused on the adventure. I think the writing is good. I think the world building is really interesting. I wouldn't call it a super heavy sci-fi. It is definitely on the heavier side, especially compared to like This Is How You Lose the Time War, because aliens and stuff like that. But I feel like it just, again, it fell a little flat. I feel like the ending was a little rushed. I felt like I wanted more from that ending. And yeah, I don't know. I have another book by this author on the shelf that I will be trying, because I think there's a lot of potential in this story that I just don't think it quite was executed as well as I had hoped. But yeah, this was, it was interesting. It was definitely a palate cleanser that I needed after finishing Earthlings. But I think this will probably be one that I'm going to find a new home for. All right, I'm going to talk about two books at once now and I didn't finish these back to back, but I'm just going to talk about them together because they are both part of the same series. I have never read, I shouldn't say never, I have not picked up a manga since I read Sailor Moon when I was a teenager. I was a diehard Sailor Moon fan, but I have been wanting to explore the medium again because I know there are some really good mangas out there and also graphic novels. I want to explore both worlds and comics. Wanted to start with manga though because I had seen this one and it seemed really interesting and really right up my alley. And so I decided to pick up a couple volumes, and I'm so glad I did because this is such a stunning little slice of life manga series. I'm talking about Veil by Kutiri. This is just beautiful. These covers alone, like just looking at the artwork on them, it is just beautiful. This is, again, a slice of life manga romance set in, I believe, Russia. You're following him and her. Him is a police officer, and he meets her by random chance on the street. She is a blind socialite running away from home because she wants to get out and actually see the world and live the world and not just be coddled and protected by her family. The police officer gets her a job running the phones at the police station because there was an opening, and it then just follows these two in these vignettes of them interacting with one another. There is a lot of like fashion looks in here. There's a lot of really like sweet dialogue. Some of these scenes are very short, and I think that's my biggest complaint is that I just want more. I mean, these are each like 100 pages, and if these were each 500 pages, I don't think I would be satisfied. I think they're really well done, and the artwork itself is just beautiful. These like very sketchy line drawings. Everything is in full color. The artist very much loves fashion, and that's very clear with a lot of the work that they do in these. I love this manga so much. I already own volumes 3 and 4. They're back on my cart back here. And I cannot wait to dive into it more and read more. I believe there's like 7 volumes out right now. I think volumes 5 and 6 are being translated into English and published later this year. So we'll absolutely be getting them. I would say if you are wanting to try manga and you haven't before, I think this is a really great starting place because it is short. It's very easy to get through. The art is beautiful. And I'm obsessed. I will be getting my hands on all of these, and this will probably be one of the few mangas that I like actually physically collect. And I'm really glad I was able to get my hands on these. Next thing that I finished was a book I actually ended up buying and reading within the same weekend. I was visiting my family this past weekend and ended up going to a Half Price Books just to see what they had. They did have this new release in stock, so I decided to grab it. Ended up just reading it in a couple sittings, and I had a feeling I would like it. I had a lot of friends who read it who were raving about it and were like, you absolutely have to read this. Please read it as soon as you can. So I felt influenced to pick it up, and I'm really glad they influenced me. Of course, I'm talking about The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This book is told in letters. It is a series of letters and emails that our main character, Sybil, is writing to various characters in her life. Sybil is a retired law clerk. She's in her 70s. She is divorced from her husband. Her children are a little estranged from her. She's a very kind of a prickly person and is struggling with a few things. She's going blind, and she is also kind of struggling with getting older. There's some tragedies in her past that she still hasn't moved through. And she is just writing all these different letters. And so over the course of the book, you are kind of unraveling her past and her coming to terms with her future, what her future will look like. There's, men that are interested in her. There's a relationship with her children, particularly with her daughter, I found to be really interesting, and I connected with pretty heavily. And it's just so well done. Sybil, I think, is a really complex and interesting character. I think she is an example of seeing like that people can evolve and they can change and they can grow. And I know a lot of people had mixed feelings on the endings, on whether or not she got what she deserved. I feel like it was a fitting ending because I feel like without spoiling anything, I feel like she suffers quite a bit very subconsciously, subtly throughout this. I feel like the ending was a good fit for her character. But if you haven't read this, if you've been a little skeptical, I would highly recommend picking it up. It's not terribly long, and because it's letters and emails, it goes really fast. Anyway, yeah, really absolutely enjoyed this. Meg, if you're watching this, thank you. You were the one who really pushed me to read it, so really glad that I finally dove into it. The next book I want to talk about is one I also read while I was on my trip. I had very long train rides there and back, so I was able to get a lot of reading done. This was one I started and finished on the same train ride. This is Vladimir by Julia May Jonas. I picked this up years back at any bookstore day, I think, because I loved this cover and I was very intrigued by the premise. And I think, unfortunately, I overhyped this book with myself, and I feel a little bit let down by it. This is following an unnamed narrator. She is married to her husband, John, and they are both professors at this like liberal arts small college in upstate New York, I believe. And at the start of the book, her husband has been accused of having inappropriate relationships with his students. It's not quite as cut and dry as that may sound, and you kind of get into that as you go throughout the book. But a huge chunk of this is the narrator kind of dealing with the aftermath of, does she stay by him? Does she stand with him? There's a lot of interesting kind of layers and complexities there. But also what happens at the same time is a young professor joins the staff named Vladimir, and she becomes almost obsessed with this man. And then you were kind of going through her dealing with this obsession and dealing with all these other things going on in her life. She has a relationship with her daughter that is a little bit tough to deal with. They both are kind of on opposite ends of things, trying to work through some problems. You have her dealing with students on campus being like, your husband, did these things. How can you stand by him? There's a lot of interesting layers and complexities here. And I think the narrator is, how do I want to put this? The narrator is a little bit like frustrating to read. I think she is narcissist in some ways. And I think that she very much does things for her own benefit more so than anybody else. She's a very, I don't want to say a selfish person in that way, but it's very much, she's kind of got this, everybody is doing things for her to her type angle to it that I feel like kind of permeates the whole text. It's very interesting. The ending is not at all what I expected it to be. I kind of feel like the ending, I don't want to say it's a cop-out, but I feel like the ending was set up to give sympathy to a character who I did not feel any sympathy for over the course of this whole book. I don't find her to be sympathetic. I don't find anything about her to be likable, quite honestly, which doesn't bother me. I don't mind an unlikable character, but I think the ending felt a little cheap overall. I think this one will probably be one that I pass on. I have some friends who want to give it a try. The writing itself is great. The prose is beautiful. I think the author is very, very good at writing, and I would like to maybe try something else by her. I just think the execution of the plot and where the plot ended up going didn't quite work for me, and I feel like part of it is just because I had hyped this book up for so long, and it just fell short of the unreasonable expectations that I put upon it. Last thing that I read in June, I decided to pick up something very short and quick to get through in a night or two. I decided to grab the first volume of the Unselected Journals of M.M. Lyon. This is by Beth Brower. I feel like a lot of people are talking about this series, or it's been kind of poking around now. I think the first book was originally published in 2019, but she is continuing to publish more in this series, and I feel like it's kind of had its moment on, BookTube and Booksta and all those recently. This is set in London in the 1880s. You are following our protagonist, M.M. Lyon, and these are her actual journals. The thing that I like about the way this is done is that the author has said that she's not planning on skipping things. This is not highlights from the journal. This is like what a daily journal would look like. Some of the entries are only a sentence long. Some of them really don't have anything to do with the larger plot movement. Some of them can be sprawling entries covering multiple pages. I think it's just really interesting and compelling, and I've had a lot of fun reading this. The first volume is extremely short, just over 100 pages. I have volume 2 on my cart over there that I will definitely be getting to soon. I think I don't want to say it's slice of life. It's a little slice of life that there's definitely a larger plot in play that I think we are slowly building up to. But this is very much just this documenting this young woman coming to London and trying to find her place. Her parents have both passed away. She is living in the house that she gets to inherit in a year, but her cousin is there and he is actually technically in charge of it, but he doesn't like her and he has her living in like this tower. There's a lot of humor to it. There's a lot of fun to it. I really like the protagonist's voice. I think Emma's voice comes through really well. I think if you liked the Emily Wilde series by Heather Fawcett, you will really like this. The protagonists have a lot of similarities in their voice, and, Emma wants to be more academic. She wants to learn things and read, and that's one of the overarching plot lines in this is her trying to get her hands on more books because Archibald has control of the library and won't let her in. So I found it to be just really interesting, engaging, a lot of fun. I think there's 8 volumes of this out right now. I plan on reading all of them as soon as I can. So that is everything that I read in June. I have a whole lot of stuff planned for July. There's a giant stack of books off camera over here. That is my July reading plan. So there'll be a lot of great stuff there that I'm looking forward to. Tell me about what you read in June. Did you read anything I read? If you have any recommendations or any thoughts on the books that I talked about, please let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please give a like and subscribe. I'd appreciate it so much. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.